It was 26 years after the making of the Indian Constitution, only in 1976, that the word secularism was inducted and inserted into the preamble of the Constitution of India. But did we as Indians walk the path of secularism in the place of secularism? Reflections by public intellectuals in the past few years show that the secularism in India is dying a slow death. This gradual de-secularization of everyday life has raised questions about India's claim as a democratic nation committed to equality and social justice as models for its citizens. Hindu-Muslim relations in India are increasingly being shaped by the alleged culpability of Muslims. The mainstream discourse driven by the so-called nationalist media, as amplified by social media, is obsessed with the idea of un-Indian and anti-national Muslims being the jihadists and being the criminal of all the wrongs. With India completing its 75th year of independence this year, all those who talk about Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb and all about the histories that are shared, etc., the fact that the two communities still remain apart is a clear failure of Indian secularism. We are forced to ask this question to the nation today, that what is the place of Muslims in India? And why is the rightist Hindu so keen to put Muslims in their place? Today, secularism has become a source of deep schism in Indian society. Supporters of secularism are the targets of hate and ridicule. If not, then why are Muslims asked to prove their loyalty to India every day? Why is Hubbul Watani different from Rashtrabad today? Why are Muslims seen as aliens to Indian ethos? The masses today echo that there's a massive potential of peaceful coexistence between the two communities. Then is it the political will that is lacking? Or these incidents of Jahangir Puri, Muzaffarnagar, and Northeast Delhi still question marks on Indian secularism? Or all of this still existed since 1984's, 1992's, and 2002's of Godhra? Has Indian secularism failed? What is the way ahead? What is preferable? A state on paper secular or practicing religious apartheid, or a state with an official religion, but a secular practice or a sort of Hindu Rashtra if needed? Greetings from Argumentative Indians. This is your host for today, Sridhar Bhatia. And to answer all of these questions, to comment on all of this and to share his opinion, we have with us a well-known journalist and the author of Unmasking Indian Secularism, Mr. Hasan Suroor. Mr. Suroor was a press fellow at the Wolfson College of University of Cambridge and has written very extensively on the identity politics, communalism, and Muslim issues. Thanks for joining us today in this knowledge session, Mr. Suroor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Suroor, amid the Hindu nationalist ruling majority and the pseudo-seculars, at least as how the Muslims call it, where does the Indian Muslim stand today? And also, we'd love to know from you, what prompted you, what is something that got you up to coming up and writing the Unmasking Indian Secularism?
First, I'll come to the title of your seminar, which says, should India give up secularism? The idea is, I'm not arguing that we should give up secularism, but sort of we look at the idea of our own idea of secularism and how have we gone about it in the past 70 years. Because our idea of secularism somehow is very different from the Western idea of secularism, which was basically intended to sort of remove religion from the public space, because religion had proved so divisive, like to wars and so on and so forth. So the idea was to free the public space from religion and religious leaders. And even while the state could have a religion of its own, like the British state or the Greek state or Irish state, but in the public sphere, the public policy will be based around the idea of citizenship, not religion. So if you're a citizen of a country, whatever that country's state religion, for instance, in Britain is Christianity, but if you're a British citizen, as I am, I'm treated the same way as all other British citizens, whether they're Christian or Hindu or whatever. So so the idea of secularism was around citizenship, not around religion. In India, we turned it on its head, basically, and we made Muslims and religious minorities the focus of secularism, as though if we don't have secularism in our constitution, the minorities will not be safe and will be whatever will happen to them. So we wake up every morning sort of tom-tomming that we have a secular constitution and so on and so forth. And whereas the fact is that the practices on the ground, whether it was in the Congress regime or now, are very different. I mean, the Satcher committee report, which came out with all this data about the discrimination against Muslims over 70 years, which is all, ironically, that commission was commissioned by, report was commissioned by the Congress party. And its data relates to their rule, not to the BJP rule. So somehow it shows that how little was done in the public sphere to promote Muslim interests in the name of secularism. And it basically became a kind of secularism became kind of a proxy war between the Congress and the Hindu right, because by saying that we have introduced secularism and so on and so forth, the other party which is opposing it is communal. So anybody who did not subscribe to the Congress idea or the liberal idea, Indian version of secularism, was cast as communal. And that created a lot of problems because there is no, I mean, when I mentioned about communalism in Britain, nobody understands what communalism means. I mean, there's no concept of communalism. I mean, you are there, you are a citizen, you're Christian, you're Muslim, or whatever. So they hear this thing, whole thing became the secularism and was conflated with the idea of the so-called Muslim question, what is the place of Muslims in India? And that minus secularism, apparently Muslims will be living in a vacuum and will have no life of their own. And I think that was a very misconceived idea. And what prompted me to write this book was the fact that, over the years, this whole debate on secularism, so it has been beaten to death. Everybody has their own version of, their own sort of explanation for why secularism failed. Hindus think that it was because it was used to appease Muslims. Some say it was used to accumulate a vote bank, and the Muslims themselves think that they were used as an instrument to sort of for the Congress to fight its own sort of proxy battle with the BJP on the Hindu right, and they became sandwiched in this debate between communalism and secularism, and they didn't benefit from secularism because if they had, then the Satcher committee report would not have been as damning as it was. And I'll quote a Muslim leader, a moderate Muslim leader, and called Shahid Siddiqui, whom I have quoted in my book. He's quite a well-known politician, and he's the editor of a very respected newspaper called Nai Dunia. And he wrote, "How long are Indian Muslims going to be the slaves of this electoral secularism, the sole purpose of which is to create fear in the minds of the minorities?" And that, I think, sums up the, I mean, I'm not a great votary of Siddiqui, but I think that sums up the Muslim attitude towards this, because they feel left down. They think they have been used in the name of secularism by the Congress as kind of a cannon fodder, and they have not benefited from it. Who has benefited are the mullahs, basically, because what has happened is this mullahs have been raising all kinds of, over the 70 years, they raise all kinds of demands in the name of Muslims, as though, like for instance, whether it was declaration of a holiday on Prophet's birthday, or whether it was a ban on Salman Rushdie's book, or whether it is opening up some mosque for namaz. And the Congress was very happy to concede these demands, as against the demands for non-discrimination in jobs, or better educational opportunities, or housing opportunities, or whatever. They were very happy to concede these because it was very easy to concede them. And then you have these mullahs who tom that look here, that we have got these demands met, and then they will get this Muslim votes for the Congress party. So this was the kind of brokership going on with the ordinary Muslim was just sort of, left in a limbo. He had nothing to say. He had no say in it at all. And also, I want to say that there's this misconception that Muslims somehow love secularism, and they are actually Muslims don't love secularism. In fact, they don't like it because Islam doesn't do secularism, and there's no secular space in Islam. If you get a Muslim and gets up in the morning, from the time he gets up till he goes to sleep, the whole day started out before him what he's supposed to do. And a masjid is not just a place of worship as a temple is or something. It's a kind of a place where political discussion, everything else goes on. So they are not this thing. They were hooked onto it only because it was presented to them as the only way to sort of protect their interests in a majority Hindu India after the partition.
Right.
They would have been perfectly happy with any other system. So long as their protection was assured, their security was assured, they would have been perfectly happy with any other system. This was dangled to them. Secularism was a great favor being done to Muslims, saying that, and Muslims didn't like. I remember because Muslims are very, as I said, Islam doesn't do secularism.
Right. Mr. Suroor, you went on to say that, Muslims, because this was the only option presented to them after 47, that is why it was accepted. I would love to know what else do you think would have been do you propose that back in 1947, leaders of the who've gotten India out of independence by then, would they have back then just acknowledged the fact that Pakistan will be a Muslim state and India not secular as they did? India will be a Hindu state and Muslims will be given their way. Is that what you're saying?
The point is, we didn't have to say we have to be a Hindu state or secular. As you yourself pointed out, the word secularism actually wasn't in the constitution.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah.
So the point was that we should have said we have going to have a state which is built around citizenship, where all citizens will be treated equally, irrespective of their religion or caste or whatever. There was no point in waving the secularism idea which Nehru picked up from the West and implanted in a deeply. I have some sympathy for people who say that if you're in a deeply religious society where every sphere of life is sort of influenced by religion somewhere, you can't have the Western style secularism at all. And what we got totally twisted out of shape because of our own compulsion. So at that point only we should have consultation or decided on a model that sort of suited our own needs and our own sensitivities and our own cultural practices and so on and so forth.
Right.
Religion secularism, you cannot remove, whether there is a Hindu state or a secular state, you cannot really remove religion from the public space, as we have seen in the past 70 years.
Absolutely.
So you have this procession, Muharram processions, you have got, these dargahs on the roadside, you have got mandirs on the roadside, you have got these Sikh processions. So you cannot do it, if you are really secular state, then you become like the French, you ban all these public display of religiosity in any form, rallies and processions and wearing either a cross or a bindi or whatever, or a Muslim wearing a cap, as they did in Turkey, it was done in Turkey, and there was a flash, it was such a backlash that finally Turkey is back to Islamism. So this is the point, you cannot take these extreme steps and then it has to have a backlash.
Right. But don't you think we're already, by the way you're coming up and saying that, this is not what India needed in the first place, at least, aren't we assuming that secularism is only for Indian, for Muslims at least? Isn't that what you're assuming in the first place? Because what about the millions of Hindus who want to live in a society which is maybe modern secular instead of just, being a Hindu taken over by Hindu rationals?
I agree, but I'm not saying, why do we have to say we have to be secular? We just say we have got to be a modern society where every citizen, everybody will have the same opportunity, where everybody will be treated like a citizen instead of being treated as a minority or as a majority. The point is this: even the liberal Hindus, they got tired of secularism. In fact, my very close Hindu friends, they are tired of secularism because they said this is a kind of secularism that actually has created the Hindu backlash.
Right. So what you're coming up to say
And
is that,
again, another point I want to make is this: the whole
please.
idea was, the assumption was that the majority community cannot have any grievances. Only the minorities can have grievances. And I think that was a very wrong starting point, because all Hindus are not rich, are not educated, are not privileged, and so on and so forth. In fact, some Muslims probably maybe more privileged than some Hindus are. So to imagine that, Hindus cannot have any grievances because they're in a majority, I think it's a load of nonsense.
Absolutely. So just to understand this a little bit more and giving it out to the audience, when you say that in the book, that's how you said that Indian secularism has failed, right? Like the model of secularism India adopted back in 1976 has failed today. So by this, what do you go on to say? One, is it that how the government implemented it? Is it the failure of on the government side, or is it from the people? Is it that the people couldn't accept it the way they should have done? What out of the
I
two?
think both are related, because the way it was implemented by the government led people to sort of then reject it. I mean, the biggest sort of, I think, rejection of secularism is by Muslims is the fact that they rejected the Congress party so overwhelmingly. I mean, if the Muslims had any attachment to this kind of secularism, they would have continued to embrace Congress party. It was they who rejected the Congress party and brought it to this stage, and the result that there's a political vacuum happened, and then the BJP came. So I think that is the biggest indictment of the kind of secularism that we have followed in this country.
Right, but again to coming back, like not to answer back, but like to come back to you on that. Why would you believe that it was just the Muslims who brought BJP to power again? What came out? Like, I'd love to know your opinion on this too. But what came out back in 2014 and again in 2019 was that the divided Hindu vote came back to the BJP, and that is how it came to power.
Exactly.
We cannot believe that we cannot believe in the first place that BJP as a political party received the Muslim votes. Like that is nonsense.
Exactly.
Because how they work on. Well, coming back, what do you believe? Like, what do you look at Hindu Rashtra like? How does Hindu Rashtra as an idea sound to you?
I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding about the book. I'm not saying that you have a Hindu Rashtra. I'm not proposing it. I'm saying that our main issue that we have been debating secularism for years. We are all Muslims are sort of every day, there's sob stories from the Muslims. There's this lynching going on and everything else and everything. But we don't say that. So what is the way out of this? I mean, the Muslims think and the Hindu liberals think that if we just sit it out, somehow the good old days will come back. And my argument is that the good old days, first, there were no good old days. And secondly, even if the Modi government goes, India has changed. A new generation has come up, which has no sort of connection with the old idea of Aryan idea of Indian and so forth. And what is they have been there for 8 years? No, and they have their idea has changed. And even if Modi goes, the new India will not be the same that we have sort of exist in our imagination. So we have to somehow think of a way of getting out of this impasse. I mean, there are a lot of India. I mean, the BJP is full of young Indians. I mean, they are not. I mean, these are very professional. I mean, I live in England and I know some of the most professional class which backs the very, very right-wing Hindu nationalism in Britain are the very well-heeled Hindu professional class. It's not as if some kind of illiterate, backward, conservative Hindus who have bought into this idea. It has become a very sort of very deeply embedded, and the idea that for 70 years, it's the Muslims who were appeased and we became sort of strangers in our own country. It's like the white minority. Somehow the whites in America and Britain think that, look here, because of these immigrants and others are being sort of appeased, we have been neglected. We have become kind of, strangers in our own country. So that kind of thing. So we cannot just imagine that if we just sit it out and somehow the next election comes, 20 years later, BJP will go and then we'll come back to the same old code. It will not happen because this will continue, this divide will continue and further deepen, because on the Muslim side also a new generation has come up, which is grown up in this climate, and similarly the whole generation of Hindus has come up, and they have lived under the shadow of this division. So this will have to live out at least one generation or two generations before any other kind of a backlash against this kind of new India begins. So if you're bothered, I mean, if you're bothered about our future, our children's future, whatever, I think we have to, our own daily sort of this thing, I mean, our daily lives have become nothing else but a sort of a big kind of agony, in the sense that if there's no lynching, if there's no attack on a Muslim, if there's no hate speech, then, it's a good day. So we have to get out, sort of find a way out of this. And I'm not saying that the Hindu Rashtra is an idea, but I said, let's explore this possibility. And you can think of other models. I'm not saying that you have to have a Hindu Rashtra. You can, after all, there are Muslim states which are Islamic nations, but they have, practices which are secular. I mean, this, of course, we think that because a transition from a so-called secular state to a Hindu state, we sort of think that probably that has not happened. But the point is, where are we living in today is effectively a Hindu state, with the fig leaf being that we are secular. So in a way, these guys are having their cake and eating it too. You're saying, okay, this is a secular country, they're a secular country, and it's in our constitution. But what happened so every time some American human rights organization or somewhere else says, please stop this human rights violation and so on, and they stop attacking Muslims, they say, no, but we are a secular state, we're committed to constitution. But then what is happening on the ground is different. So even if you have a Hindu state, I don't think things are going to get worse. In fact, they may then, because they think this grievance has been addressed, they might become a little more benign, more kind of feudal. Okay, all right, let's take care of these poor guys now that we are, we have got our own state. It's a big leap of faith, but then you have to start somewhere. And you can try any other model if you like, but, sorry about this. You can try any other model, but my thing is, why I have prompted to write this book was to start a debate on finding an alternative model to the situation that we are living in through today, because it is not sustainable.
Right.
Sorry about this.
The fact that you're proposing to say that it is about what happens on the ground and not what the Constitution basically says. I'd also come back to you because you were talking about how this Hindu state or the Hindu Rashtra that, something you've talked about, goes up to address the grievances of the minority. But I just want to know that how will this Hindu Rashtra, which you propose to say, how will this address the grievances of the majority?
That is left to the Hindus. And the point is, right now they say we are hobbled because of secularism. We cannot do this, we cannot do that. So it's because our hands are tied by this so-called Nehruvian idea of secularism and so on. Once that gone, then it's their problem. And my limited issue, I mean, pardon my saying it, is not what happens with the Hindu community. My concern is that the situation for Muslims is very unsustainable. It's a very selfish thing I'm saying, but because I'm a Muslim and I have this thing, I want Muslims in this country to feel safe and secure.
Right. Coming to the question, in the book as well, you mentioned saying that, what happened in 84, what happened in, again in 92 in Babri, what happened in 2002 in Gujarat, and then in Madhya Pradesh, what happened, all of that proves that secularism in India has failed. Right? That's what you've proposed at least. But from 47 to today, 2022, if we can count some incidents on our fingers, does that really, because there are enough years between that, from 84 coming back to 2002, there have been like 20 years, 16, 17 years in between. And just quoting what happened in 2002 and what happened in 84, how does that actually sound? Like, how does that sound to someone who's not well known to the topic? Because there have been enough number of years to prove. If two dates, just
I agree with you. I never quote those two things. I mean, they are mentioned anyway because they are very major events. But two things. one proof of the failure of secularism is the condition of Muslims. I mean, which is supposed to sort of, in a secular country, as Indian citizens, Muslims are supposed to be, have the same kind of opportunities and so on. One is that. Second is this whole idea that there was this gap, that nothing happened, is not really correct. I mean, you're a much younger person, but I remember I started life in Delhi as a reporter with the Statesman, which was in the 70s. And there was not a day when they were called communal riots. So in Aligarh, in Muradabad, in all these North Indian states. And we in the Statesman and other newspapers, we used to have it reached a point that we used to have a reporter just on 24/7 duty, so that if anything happened somewhere, we could just rush to these places and report from there. Situation was so bad. So this whole nostalgia about a time when Hindus and Muslims lived sort of, like very great mates is wrong. The only difference from now and then is that then we were at least civil to each other. Now that civility is gone. So at that point, yes, we all mixed together and celebrated, sent food and all the exchange food. And during Ramzan, probably all these political parties used to have these iftar parties. Then of course we actually dismissed them as political stunts. But now we remember them with great nostalgia, because they were at least a recognition that there was a community, they had this festival, and there was an attempt to reach out and get their votes. Now they don't even do that, because they don't want your votes. Your votes are not, you have been totally sort of enfranchised. So this idea that there was before 1984 or after this in 2002, nothing happened is wrong, because there was Ahmedabad. The UP was on fire almost every second day.
Okay. Do you see the situation changing is my question.
I don't. If I did, then I wouldn't write this book.
Okay. Mr. Suroor, you have, you come up to say that, you argue that we were never really secular, right? Similarly, we were never really a very perfect democracy. What people, what countries come up to say is that, they're liberal, they're socialist, but they're not perfectly socialist. They're not perfectly liberal as well. None of the countries are perfectly democratic. And you come up to say that we should give up secularism because we couldn't succeed in it. We haven't really, because if you look at the media as the fourth pillar of our democracy, we haven't really been successful in making up that, India as democratic as we need it. So in fact, there is hardly any nation who's done that. My question is that should we actually give up the cherished ideas if we cannot live up to them?
No, my point is, first, I'm not interested in secularism, because I think secularism was a construct which they themselves, it was basically meant as a kind of a toy, kind of a thing to, as though it was a magic wand and you waved it and suddenly Muslim everybody will. And then it was also, I think, Nehru's this whole liberal thing to the West, create an image abroad, the Western countries, how. And to show that since Pakistan had become a theocracy, so look how different we are from them. These guys have gone and become this, but we remain secular and so democracy. So it also was meant, I think, for an international audience and for this thing. So I'm not interested whether we call ourselves secular or not, so long as we are treated as citizens, equal citizens, as far as possible. There can never be total equality. It was not even in the communist states. So long as people are treated with respect on the basis of their citizenship, I'm not bothered about religion and anything. So long as they are not discriminated in jobs, they're treated with a certain amount of respect, they have educational opportunities, I'm happy with that. And their lives are secure. They are not always, afraid that, they feel insecure that you don't know what's going to happen the next moment. And if they want to eat beef, either you should lay down the whole thing. These things are do's and don'ts, so that there should be a rule of law. What has happened in India is that the rule of law has collapsed if there was one. It never existed even in Congress regime, and it has got worse now. So why successful democracies have is rule of law, which we don't have. The courts are our last sort of refuge. But even courts now, how long can they withstand? The political pressures, whether it is, whichever regime is there, some point that on issues which are very dear to the government, finally the courts also buckle, So some court will give one judgment which certainly will make Muslims happy. Another court will give another judgment will make Hindus happy, and the third one will give a judgment which probably the government wants. So I mean, this is it. So there is no faith left in our institutions.
Okay, but coming back, you're proposing that there's no faith left in institutions, but all of these are really like this is what has grown out of. That's what you're saying, that this has grown out in years. After 47, Mr. Suroor, don't you think that taking a path different from Pakistan has paid well off, or don't you really think that if India would have been a Hindu Pakistan, it would have been where it is today? Do you think that?
So it's very different from being a Hindu Pakistan and being a country which doesn't tom that is secular or has secularism written in the constitution, but treats its citizens equally. And we could have done that. The point was that we were so hooked on this idea of secularism because it sounded so romantic. I mean, I'm not saying I've never questioned the motives. It was a very noble idea, and it's a classic case of very noble intentions going totally haywire. Because the man who introduced it, he didn't live long. I mean, when he lived, there were tensions, but then he didn't live long enough to sort of sustain it. And then Muslim, it's a fact that Muslims became a vote bank because they started treating Congress as they're my bab. Because if Congress is with the secular, this thing is not there, then these Hindus, communal Hindus will eat us up. I don't think that would have been. That's a correct thing, but that's the idea that Congress sold to the Muslims, the secularists sold to the Muslims. And Muslims, despite their skepticism about the real secularism, bought this because this was the only way they thought they could be protected. Otherwise, if Muslims had been just told that, look, you live in a country where you'll be treated like all citizens, like Hindus and so on and so forth, it was all right. They would have bothered about secularism because secularism has put a burden on them also to show their secularism. The fact is that Muslims are not secular at all in their practices because they're not supposed to be secular. And it is not any kind of secularism has become a badge of honor, as if you tell somebody that you're not secular. It's an abuse. It's not a term of abuse. The opposite of secularism is not communalism or some kind of primitive distinct. Secularism was an idea which came in the West because of certain very specific conditions.
Right. Mr. Suroor, when I quote Hindu Pakistan, what I come to say is that this is the idea that Pakistan took. But if we just replace the terms Hindu and Muslims, like we'll give equal status, but we'll be a Muslim state. That's what Pakistan said, right? That we will be a Muslim state, but given equal status. But what happened to Hindus there was that out of 23 or 24%, if I'm not wrong, back in 2019-18, Hindus fell to like 4 to 6% over there. That's what happens when you commit yourself to being a Muslim state or being a Hindu state, and then that you say that you would be given equal rights.
The difference is that Pakistan was founded on the very basis of religion. India was not founded on the basis of religion.
Right.
It was a Muslim population which moved away and said, look, yeah, we'll found a state where only Muslims, because we feel secure. So I think analogy is not very distinct. And there also Jinnah, of course, when he made his speech in Constituent Assembly, he said everybody will be equal and all that sort of thing. But then he died very suddenly, and then they changed the constitution actually. So they no longer pretend that they're secular. Our pretension is very different. Our pretension is that we fancy ourselves as a secular state, but actually we are not.
Okay. Again, to ask you, what assures you that people who oppose secularism want an equal society?
I don't think. I mean, I don't think I have no such this thing that they want an equal society. Nobody who's in privileged position wants an equal society. Right. But the point is, because the Muslims have become the attention of focus of attention, so the fissures within the Hindu society have actually more or less being overlooked, And there's a consolidation of the Hindu vote. I mean, BJP is no longer a party of the Brahmin shopkeepers. There are all kinds of castes, and everybody has voted in, even the ones who were oppressed by the thing. And it is because of the whole idea that we have the common enemy, Muslim. So when this enemy goes so-called or sort of tamed or whatever, then those fishes will come out, and probably then the oppressed Hindus will fight and fight for justice. It is a good idea, actually.
But the fact is that what is the assurance that they do not want Muslims, like they do not want to degrade Muslims at least as second-grade citizens, second-class citizens in India?
But they are. I mean, the point is that Muslims are second-class citizens. Every day they feel. I mean, if somebody asks you, tell me whether your name is Muslim or not, and if somebody doesn't say, then because he's a beard, so he's presumed to be a Muslim, so he's killed. I mean, the point is this: the hatred is so much. The government, the state policy officially may not be to treat them as second-class citizens, but on everything, even the minister said that if you're not happy here, you can go to Pakistan. Why say Pakistan? Why not say go anywhere else?
Okay, Mrs. Suroor, do you think that everyone who votes down for the Bharatiya Janata Party sees Muslim as a common enemy? Is that what you say?
I don't. I have argued with my Muslim friends. This whole idea, just as Hindus have stereotyped Muslims, Muslims are stereotyped Hindus, or BJP members as communal. No, I don't think they are. There must be. I mean, there may be more communal elements probably in so-called secular parties who happen to be there only because. I mean, the fact that every day somebody from the Congress goes and joins the BJP or Shiv Sena, and similarly from SP goes somewhere else, shows what? You mean these guys? That means they were not secular to begin with, and suddenly because they have gone to the BJP, and this is basically a power play. People wherever they can win elections or whoever gives them tickets or positions of power, they go there. So Scindia has not suddenly become, communal because he's gone to, either he was always communal and hiding in the Congress, or there's no difference. He's just a politician. He's looking for opportunities. So today I'm working for a Hindu newspaper. Tomorrow I'll work for another newspaper because it gives me more salary. That's all. I mean, this is
yeah. That's like
opportunism basically. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Muslim made a huge mistake by totally, and that was again the Congress at their this thing, totally boycotting BJP. They made no effort ever to engage with the BJP. Right from the beginning, they had also reached out to the BJP, started voting somewhere with a good Hindu BJP candidate was there against a bad Muslim candidate or against a bad Congress candidate. They should have voted because finally you want results. But the moment that whole message went out from the Muslim community that, well, we can never vote for the BJP, and they got this, and they said, okay, we don't want your votes anymore anyways. We have consolidated our own vote bank.
That's how. Yeah, you're actually quoting how the Assam Chief Minister works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming back, do you entertain other motivations for Indian people, to vote for BJP?
To vote BJP?
Yeah.
I think a lot of this, I mean, I don't know, maybe majority, they do buy in this idea that India is a Hindu, I mean, the whole idea of Hindutva, that it's a Hindu country basically. And okay, we can tolerate, the liberal will say we can tolerate these other guys also, but nobody is paying for their blood. But they do have this idea, they have a lot of anti-Muslim prejudice, this is Islamophobia, and there's a lot of Hindu phobia among the Muslims. It's very hard to find Muslims who don't suffer from Hindu phobia. So, I mean, this whole idea, just because Muslims have now sort of become victims and that they are all sort of, very squeaky clean. I mean, that's not true. Both have stereotypes, both have prejudices against each other, and they feed on each other. So this Uvaisi fellow, he's the same as Nupur Sharma. They feed on each other, they need each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mrs. Suroor, religion has long been exploited by the Indian rulers, whether during British Raj or independent India again, as you proposed to say. Isn't the solution in people getting over their religious differences instead of, the state acknowledging the supremacy of one group?
Sorry, instead of the state acknowledging?
Instead of the state acknowledging the supremacy of one group, Hindus, as you propose.
No, how will they overcome their prejudices? I mean, the point is, if the party which is in power and the main players in politics, they think that the prejudices are the promoting prejudices is the way to get votes, and that's what the whole democracy is about, getting votes, then you cannot. Nobody is encouraging people to give up, prejudices. And so Muslim leaders have their own vested interest in keeping alive these prejudices, saying that the Hindus are bad, and the Hindu leaders have the same thing about the Muslims. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any genuine attempt. My whole point is that we have been talking about these things ad nauseum over the years, but nobody has sat down and actually said, how do we resolve this? So let at least have the reason why I got for this extreme sort of solution. It's not a solution with a proposal, is because at least let's start a debate.
Yeah. I'll come
and
back.
if this debate leads to something good, then why not?
Absolutely.
Something else might come out of not a Hindu Rashtra. And Hindu Rashtra, I mean, it's not a word of a term of abuse. It's because it has become, because the way it was promoted by the RSS leader Savarkar and all that. And but the idea is, it's not a term of abuse. It's taken a Muslim state, which is not Islamic state, is not a term of abuse. So how does a Hindu Rashtra becomes a term of abuse? I mean, a Christian Britain or Christian America is all right, then why not a Hindu India?
Right.
I mean, we need not become Taliban. We need not, all Muslim theocracies are not Taliban. So Hindu India need not become a kind of that sort of a place.
Yeah, I get that.
And I want to say, I want to pay a huge sort of, we Muslims owe a huge debt to the liberal Hindus. I mean, because if the liberal Hindus were not, I mean, there's a very hardcore of Hindu liberals. Of course, it is over the years there has been erosion. Muslims would not have survived in this country. Forget secularism and all that. It is the Hindu liberals, whether they were journalists or other professionals, intellectuals, or whatever, who supported not because of Muslims, but because they believed in the idea of liberalism. And they were not necessarily, they didn't call themselves secular or whatever. They were liberal Hindus, broadly liberal Hindus, who believed in rule of law, who believed that there is diversity, has to be respected. People have their own religion, their own way of life, and so on. That should be respected. And that's what they wanted.
Right. Mr. Suroor, can you, coming back to you again, can you walk us through the solution that you propose for India and Muslims, the situation that you claim to, what is your opinion on the solution that comes?
There is no solution. That's what I'm trying to say, because nobody is trying to discuss. If you don't even discuss, how will you reach a solution? And what I'm trying to say, maybe this leap of faith by telling Hindus, okay, all right, you think that you feel that you are become a second-class citizen in your own country or whatever. Okay, we recognize that you are a majority country. You are in a majority, and this India, you are entitled to sort of some entitlement. So okay, you give Indian state, let it turn into a Hindu state. In the sense, the religion becomes the Hindu. So you can say we are Hindu India. As we keep saying, kaho Hindu, garv se kaho Hindu. You can say with pride that we are a Hindu India. But then you follow these other, don't use the word secular or whatever, but treat other people equally. After all, Hinduism doesn't say that you kill other people. Hinduism also says the same. Hindus themselves claim that we are the most generous and people, and we make it notice. So treat them according to your own Hindu practices, traditions, and so on and so forth.
Right. So, Mr. Suroor is
that you go to Pakistan or you're anti-national just because I'm criticizing you. I'm also a citizen, you are also a citizen. So if I criticize you, I'm criticizing it because as a citizen, I have a right to criticize the government. I'm not criticizing Hinduism, I'm criticizing the state. It's like the anti-Semitism business in Israel. You cannot criticize Israeli government's policies without being accused of anti-Semitism. Similarly, Muslims, you cannot criticize Islam without being labeled as Islamophobic. Islam is a religion. I mean, you can discuss religion and say that these are the areas which you don't agree with it. Doesn't mean that you say that all followers of Islam should be killed or removed from the face of the world.
So do you
Finally,
defend?
we have to open up our mind. If we have closed mind and we see that nothing, there's no point in trying anything. This will lead to this. This will lead to the other thing. If you don't try, you just sit on your haunches. I mean, nothing is going to happen.
Right. So is
There's
this
too
what you?
much blame game. There was too much blame game. Everybody pointing fingers at the others, but nobody coming up with any suggestions or any this thing. If the BJP tries to reach out, immediately there's suspicion. There's something behind this. There's some conspiracy theories. Okay, there might be some suspicion, but at least if they are reaching out to you, at least give them a chance to, give it a touch, give it a try. You say, no, they are doing it because of something else. We don't know what it is.
Okay. So this is what you propose, Mr. Suroor, in your opinion, that rather than naming India a secular state, let's accept that this is a Hindu state.
Let's banish the word secularism altogether. Let's not talk about secularism because it's become a sort of red flag to the bull, So let's just forget it because it has not served any purpose, and we don't need it. I mean, we don't need this kind of secularism in any way. I mean, if you need secularism, then you have to do a lot more. You have to really remove religion from the public space, there's Hindus, Muslims, or whatever, and that will require a revolution.
Right. So in your opinion, it's you come up to say that let's have it in practice and not just in name.
Yeah.
Let's have it in practice. Thank you so much.
It's like what Mao said, that the color of the cat doesn't matter so long as it catches the mice. So that's the point. I mean, that is finally this. The taste of the pudding lies in the, eating.
Yeah, there's no point naming India secular rather than if we appease the Muslims. Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, Mr. Suroor. Thank you for sharing your opinion on this. Thank you for adding your contribution to the debate of the day, at least. We at Argumentative Indians hope to see you back again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Suroor.